Welcome back to another episode of Tech Talks Daily. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we've got quite a unique guest on the podcast today, and he's pushing the boundaries of what technology can do in the world of sports and gaming. His name is Chris Ebeling, and he's a world-renowned animator, creative director, writer, and digital artist. I think it's fair to say he's a digital renaissance man. He's worked on some pretty big Hollywood blockbusters such as the Lego Movie, The Great Gatsby, and so many more. And including that, he's also got AAA gaming cinematic productions under his belt. And he's currently working with Behaviol, which is a revolutionary tech studio that is creating digital athletes using AI and machine learning and introducing a new level of engagement in the world of sports entertainment with their flagship game, Meta 11. So today we're going to dive into Chris's journey, discuss the use of AI in AAA games, ethical considerations for AI, the evolution and future of esports, privacy and AI-dominated gaming environments, and the involvement of sporting companies in the gaming industry. We've got so much cool stuff to talk about today. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Denmark, where we're going to dive into this immersive world of tech.
So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Chris Ebeling, and I am the Chief Creative Officer at Behaviol. What I do, I love all aspects of creativity when it comes to building digital products. My background's been in film mainly and games. So I've worked on big Hollywood blockbusters. It was just the 10th year anniversary actually of the Lego Movie. Not when it was put into cinemas, but from when we were working on it. So we're actually rallying the troops on LinkedIn. Everybody was talking about how great a time that was. So that's 10 years ago today, or this month, that we were working together on the Lego Movie. We've worked on things like The Great Gatsby. I worked on Happy Feet movies, as well as Marvel products and DC products, cinematics, games, and then everything from mobile to console to PC gaming. And then I've always had the inkling and the passion and curiosity for new technologies. Like, how can new technologies that come out, and there's all these buzzwords being thrown around, but how can we actually grasp them, understand them, and then use them to build even more entertaining products, and then hopefully entertaining products that give back to the user.
And I've got to ask, did you or your team have anything to do with infecting the world with the earworm of everything is awesome in that Lego Movie? Anything to do with you?
We're part of that crew, but it has to remain to be said, there's like 500 people working on a movie like that. But, that I'll give to the director at the time. So that was Chris McKay. And that must have been his play along with Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I think they would have had a play in that along with the music artists. So my side of the Lego Movie was animation. I love character animation. I love performance, like bringing inanimate objects to life. It's so much fun. And especially, I think the Lego Movie was special because we had to actually create these emotionally connecting characters through simple bricks. And we weren't doing it like Lego usually had done with bending them and everything. It had to stay true to the concept of stop motion. So we had to trick people into A, believing these things were living and breathing, but then B, also that it was actually, is it computer graphics or is it stop motion? And one of the highlights, I think everybody at Animal Logic, which was the studio at the time in Australia, was that when the first trailer released, people were actually discussing in the comments in YouTube whether it was stop motion or computer graphics. And that, there you go. And then that was, of course, as an artist and someone who was working on it, it ticked the box of achievements, right? So, yeah.
Oh, incredibly cool. And I am conscious we all have people listening from all around the world that are hearing about Behaviol for the very first time. So for those people, can you tell me a little bit more about what it is and also how the concept of creating digital athletes using AI and machine learning came about? Because I feel there's got to be a story too there, right?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so but I'll have to dig a little deeper in my backstory. So I did movie games, and then I jumped into emerging technologies where I helped found an academy in Sydney with the University of Technology, which was a first of its kind industry-led master's course, where we jumped in and we actually taught the students how to create games and movies of today, but then also where is the future going? How can you take these competencies and use them for AR, VR, AI, virtual production at the time, as well as any new technologies, mixed reality headsets that are coming out, right? And with the Apple Vision Pro recently released, and we have an idea that this spatial computing time is coming, right? So we wanted to prepare our students for that. But then there was also this thing called blockchain. right? And blockchain came along, and it started off by being, of course, part of blockchain is the cryptocurrencies that we see. But then there's also, of course, at that time, there was something called crypto kitties where you could digitally own pictures of cats. Do you remember those, Neil?
Yes, I remember it well.
So then you could take one picture of a cat and you could mate it with another picture of a cat and create a new unique cat. And the beauty of this was it was all on the blockchain. So it was immutable. It was there to live forever. So you could always trace who owned what cat and where the original data was stored, right? So me and a couple of co-founders, we had this idea about, okay, well, what about digital horse racing? How can we create a similar idea, like instead of cats, it's horses, but then you have the utility of racing, buying, breeding, selling, and racing, and winning using crypto technology or blockchain technology to create a horse racing ecosystem. So we went off and did that called ZED.RUN, which was the first of its kind back in 2019, and it rode the wave, which was really great, a peak, and it's still going. And I worked on ZED.RUN for 4 years. I'm still involved with it as a founder. However, I've left operationally inside. I'm more on top of it because I felt the creative juices were done. And then there was this AI, artificial intelligence storm, right? Like if you've been living under a rock, you wouldn't know what AI is, but everybody I think knows what ChatGPT is. We have Midjourney, all these things that are coming out. And then just that exponential growth of this technology and all these new models. So I was really interested in working with that as well. I'd done a little bit at the University of Technology, but now there was an opportunity to fuse Web3 technology as well as this behemoth artificial intelligence and actually create a new concept. And these guys at Behaviol were doing that. And so they reached out to me and they said, look, we're doing this. We're starting with a cricket game where we're starting with these, we call them omni-avatars, these sports avatars, where we're using AI to train them. So they have access to some data, which they have rightfully and legally purchased or licensed, which is 5 years of cricket data. Then we put into our unique AI models to train digital avatars to be their own sports star within the realm of cricket. And so using those models, we are able to then use that data, train the avatars, but then they can also go on and self-train and self-learn and reinforce learn by playing each other to then pick up the game of cricket, right? Which is pretty exceptional. And we will be releasing some of the behind the scenes training videos soon because it's really cool, right? But then my job is to come on board as a chief creative officer and go, okay, so we have this beautiful underlying technology. How can we wrap entertainment around that? Like, how can we make this engaging, fun, frictionless, and enjoying it? It has to be fun. So we've built out, our goal is to build out a sports omniverse. And when I go on record and talk about it, I say the Marvel of sports, right? So think about the Marvel universe and think about each of these avatars being a superhero in their right. And you can now own one of these. You can train them. You can clone them. We won't say it's breeding because that would be wrong, but you can clone these avatars together and create new avatars. And then you're competing in this sports ecosystem. Now, our focus is first cricket, which is an untapped space. I mean, nothing has been done like this for cricket before. The challenge and what's really exciting is to break down the cultural barriers of cricket, right? Like it's very Commonwealth focused. There's a huge fandom, right? And very passionate fans. So the challenge is being sensitive and respectful to the history, while opening up and breaking down the cultural barriers so it opens up and brings in the wider world. And our belief is by wrapping really engaging stories, really engaging characters, other cultures into these stories, we're able to then showcase cricket in a brand new way, but also in a way that where fans who otherwise just everyday fans can watch a game now can actually get it one step closer to their favorite team, to their favorite player. They can be their favorite player or perhaps play against them. And it's just a new way of fan engagement using these technologies. I mean, I could go on, which hopefully I don't. So stop me anytime.
No, it's incredibly cool. And just listening to your story now, what fascinates me is everything that you're doing now is almost like an amalgamation of everything that you've ever done. And listening to your story now, you've transitioned from working on Hollywood blockbusters, AAA games, co-funding ZED.RUN, and now to Behaviol. I'm curious, how has your previous work experience maybe influenced the way you approach your role at Behaviol?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. I love that you said that because only looking backwards can we see the road that we took, right? And when I look backwards, I do really feel like there's this Japanese philosophy, I think, or saying called your ikigai, which is like your sweet spot in life. And I feel like I'm really close to that. I don't know if anything is perfect, but I feel like I'm in a really good place because of my history, what I've done, my experience, and where we're going as well. So in terms of learnings, I mean, first things first, it's culture and it's people. So I'm actually also very passionate, and that was also part of why I went to the University of Technology. I'm passionate about teaching. I'm passionate about teaching the right way. And I have this whole component about, they call it soft skills, but I like to call it the human skills and the hard skills. And that's really about culture and getting along. I mean, anybody who's worked with me will know that I'm serious about my work. I'm very passionate about it, but I also really want to have a good time. I think it's absolutely important that good people having fun together will do their best work, right? Like if we're enjoying what we're doing and we're passionate about it and we enjoy who we're working with, yes, there's going to be a bit of disagreements, but being able to leave your ego aside, work together as a team is absolutely crucial and number one. And that's something that I've taken with me all the way from the early days of being an animator, all the way to being a teacher, to a founder, and where I'm now as a chief creative officer. So that's one key thing. I mean, the other one is also being able to build community and being in touch with the community and being transparent, right? I mean, with Zed, even though I've left them operationally, I mean, what we were able to build, there was a really cool and passionate community, like the first of its kind, really, in the Web3 space, as you mentioned. But what else we learned as well is that we don't want to start in Web3. So we really have to meet the masses where they are. And in this case, we're still in Web2. And we still need to meet the masses where they want to play. And we also need to focus on what's most important when you're creating a game, which is fun first. So those are really crucial elements where, you know, we want to meet people where they are. We want to make this game easy to onboard, so inclusive, accessible, free to play approach, which is very stock standard when you talk about mobiles, for example, or the games like Fortnite or Call of Duty, right? These are free to play games that bring people in. They get to have fun and enjoy it. They create communities and a sense of belonging, right? And make it worth your while. And then from there, then you can transition them onto Web3, but that has to be done through education, through really good user experience, and also with their permission. So that's kind of the key learnings, I would say.
And I think also the concept of using AI to power AAA games, again, incredibly fascinating and cool. So can you share how Behaviol uses AI in its flagship game? I think it's Meta 11. And also the impact that you've seen it have on that entire gaming experience.
Yeah. So it's incredible. The fact that we can actually mimic real world players in the game. I mean, it's been done before, you can say, in video games. Like you could have a game like FIFA where, the player moves like Ronaldo, but never before have you fed in the real data from, say, Ronaldo. I'm not saying we're doing that, but you could. And so the player, this has this AI character that you are coaching, in effect, you're managing, you're coaching, will then have those traits and those skills and move and have those kind of abilities and traits where he'll go left instead of going right more often, and he'll kick to the midfield. I mean, I'm not a Ronaldo expert, so I'm making this shit up, sorry. But if I was going to talk to someone about LeBron James, like basketball, then I could go into more details. But for cricket, for example, it's like we have one of our co-founders is Kumar Sangakkara, who's one of the best cricketers in the world, actually. He's got the second most runs scored all time. He retired at the peak of his career. He played for Sri Lanka. He still coaches, and he does commentary over in England. Absolute legend and a humble guy. But we have his data, and we have his motion capture data on top of that. So now we're able to actually bring him into Meta 11, right? And you can now extend his career, for example. But more importantly, you can also now have users and fans of him get one step closer in a brand new way, right? Either by owning his avatar that moves and plays like him, or playing alongside him. And it has to be said that it's not just fully AI-driven game either. That's the foundational layer of the starting point. On top of that, now you as a player have to train them, but you also have to coach them, give them the right accessories, but also then call out in-game and real-time strategies, whether to play more aggressive, whether to play more defensively, whether you need a substitute and bring out the mongoose bat or whatever it may be, right? So, and on top of all that, again, back to my point on culture, and something I've learned is that story is king, right? Or queen. I like to go both ways there just to respect everyone. But story is essential, right? Having good, strong story wrapped around the technology and wrapped around the entertainment will help us bridge new cultures into the sport, but also expand our reach, because appealing characters, as we talked about the Lego characters, bringing them to life, like building appealing emotional characters that we can relate to, bring us one step closer to any product, right? And whether it's a 15-second commercial ad for McDonald's or a 2-hour-long Christopher Nolan movie, story is king, right? You want to be taking on a journey.
And I think whenever we mention AI, we always have to mention using AI responsibly. We always have to bring it up. And as we see more AI integration into the gaming industry, this is a subject we don't get to hear much about. So what are some of the ethical considerations that companies might need to keep in mind, and especially in your approach too? Is that something that's always in the back of mind?
100%. I think there's still a lot of regulations that need to happen, and there's a lot of ethics to consider. I mean, especially when you're talking about like these generative AI models, such as Midjourney. I actually just made a post on LinkedIn because I use Midjourney to visualize ideas, right? And that's where I start. I love just putting it because it's such a quick turnaround, right? But there is of course, if you use that artwork directly, that would be in breach of IP because it's just scraping the internet and creating something new out of everybody's ideas. We don't do that. I mean, our AI models are unique. There is some generative AI, however, that's through our own data sets. And like I mentioned before, we do license the data that we use. So we pay a fee for that data. And by bringing that into our game, it is within the legalities of ethics. Yeah. However, moving forward, when we are looking at building our own generative AI models for users to be more creative, and I think that's a really important point. We want to do that. We want to use AI in our game to build tools so users can go and build their own jerseys or build their own bats and have even more agency in the way they want their teams and players to look and play. And when it comes to that, then we'll be building our own data pools. And of course, again, ethically purchasing the rights to certain artworks or certain models or whatever it is you're putting into that pool where the AI can generate and scrape from.
And before I was doing this podcast, over 10 years ago, I was on a website called This Is My Joystick, and I was writing about the rise of esports, even back then, how it was filling stadiums and the fans that follow this stuff, even more so than traditional sports in many occasions. Yeah. This space has continued to evolve over the past decade. And only this morning, I wrote an article about people leaving Twitch, going to Kick, etc., and how that community is growing. So in your opinion, what will the esports landscape look like in the next 10 years? And also, how do you at Behaviol plan to contribute to this future? Because it's continuously evolving, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, the Olympics are coming, right? Yeah. And honestly, like we saw it, like, again, you only have to look backwards to see where we're going is kind of a thing I always like to say is like, so look at the last 10 years, look at the last 20 years, and then you can kind of imagine where we're going the next 10, 20 years. And the last Olympics, I believe it was the first time they had skateboarding and BMXing. And this Olympics coming up will be breakdancing, will be a first, which is great because these are sports. These are talented professionals, right? And esports is no different. I mean, I dare say anybody who thinks that it's not a professional or that playing video games, try doing what they do, right? Yeah. And that's no different to the guy who's throwing darts or the guy who's doing curling or whatever your passion or profession is. These are professional athletes, but they just happen to work through a digital medium. So that's happening. And just a side anecdote, every time anybody says, like, your son plays a lot of computer, I said, yeah, I'm preparing him for the Olympics. And then it kind of goes away. And you've also seen, 14-year-olds make, $2 million or whatever it was, $1.4 million winning a Fortnite competition. Like, that's what 14-year-old could do that anywhere else, right, in the world. So it's really disruptive, and for a reason, and because there's a huge market for it. And let's not forget that sports is entertainment, right? If you can fill the seats and you can get people to watch it and you can sell the TV licensing, that's what makes sports go around, right? And esports is no different, and they can fill the seats, right? So where we sit positioning is we're all for it. And we believe with the technology that we're fusing and the entertainment layers that we're fusing, that esports is definitely an avenue for us where we will be exploring and expanding into, whether it's through cricket, through basketball, through football, as you call it, soccer for the American fans. And that one's always tough, right? Because I lived in Australia for 17 years, and then it's footy, and then, what's going on? No, but so, yeah, I think it's interesting. And there's a quote actually from, it's a Stephen Hawking quote, where he actually says, digital actors that could be forever young and could perform otherwise impossible feats, our future idols might not even be real. And like, the future of our idols are probably going to be digital, right? I believe so, because we're already, like, what he means, that when I read that quote, I think, yeah, we're already looking on the screen. We're already idolizing through our TVs or our phones or our iPads or video games, right? Or a Twitch stream. And with AI and this new technology, we're able to bring these digital avatars, these entities to life and have even more emotional connection with us. So I don't think he's wrong.
No, he's 100% right. And I would say we're already there. I mean, before we started recording today, when I was writing that piece on Kick, I saw that Kick had paid one of the top Twitch streamers 100 million to leave that platform or to go on to Kick. And also, I wrote a piece last year on AI-generated influencers. And there's a ton of them on Instagram with like over 1 million followers. It's really here, isn't it?
It's here, yeah. And that Kick guy, I forget his name, but I saw comparisons to him making more money than a guy like LeBron James.
Yeah.
One of the greatest basketball players of all time, who's made most money all time. He's getting paid more than him. Yeah. Like, he's a streamer, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's ridiculous, but it's, yeah, you're right. It's happening. So.
Another topic we've got to cover, of course, is privacy, particularly in an AI-dominated gaming environment. So
yes.
A question we've got to go there. I mean, how does Behaviol handle user data, and what steps do you take in ensuring privacy? Because, again, big topic, right?
Absolutely important as well. I mean, we handle our privacy like most games do. Again, we are a Web 2 game first and foremost, so we are not on-chain. We're not in the Web 3 space yet. That's where we're going to transition into if users choose to. And, of course, once a user wants to go into that stage, there will be a KYC, right? You'll have to go through the right enemy, especially with all the rules and regulations being thrown around and then tipped on their head in America every now and then put back into place and whatnot. Like, we're still trying to figure out what these rules are. So that's it. But otherwise, it's your standard names, emails, addresses, your age. And we don't collect this information to farm it out or anything like that. We collect that actually to provide and maintain our platform, to understand where our users are from, to do our data analysis. That's a hard one. Conducting research. And then, of course, also to prevent fraud and illegal activities. So we do it in a very stock standard way, which is known. But then again, when we're going to get into the Web3 space, there has to be that KYC because it's imperative when you're dealing with digital assets and potentially, dare I say, tokens in the future, but we're not going there.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about esports, but I'm also seeing many traditional sports companies are also moving into the esports arena. So I'm curious, how are you seeing that crossover influencing the gaming industry and also Behaviol's role in this new era of immersive gaming, which is only going to expand, isn't it, over the next few years?
Yeah, I think we're still early. And I mean, we were still early when we were building ZED.RUN. And we saw it there as well. I mean, there's a lot of interest for real world sports to come into the space, and it makes sense. Again, to the esports growth and the fandom that's behind that, these big sports want to extend their brand. They want to extend their coverage. They want to extend their user base. So, they want to leverage this power of technology and being able to step into, dare I say, the digital space, which is known as the metaverse as well. But, again, depending on who you say that to, they go, oh, the metaverse, I've heard that enough. And what a buzzword. But, I still believe that there is going to be a place called the metaverse, and it is going to be enabled with Web3 technology. And it is a place where brands and us people will have and will live and be, but in balance with real world. And sports fans can also feel closer to their heroes using this technology, right? Like, so again, with us in Behaviol, what we're trying to do is really engage fandom in a different way. So the fact that you can actually own or play next to your idol, and that idol is going to play much like he does in the real world because of the AI models that we've created. That's new and that's unique. We feel like that's giving the fans something new and a stronger emotional connection to be around. You really want to look at it as well as like ESPN, but in the digital space, like broadcasting as well, right? Like broadcasting is already there and it's got a set framework. Doing that with a digital sport, it's going to be not much different. So these big sports broadcasters and these big sports brands, they've already got the framework for it. They just have to pivot so it's digitally and, of course, change a bit of their approach. But then in doing so, they're going to be able to open up, again, their IP, their brand, their entertainment product to a wider audience and globally. And I think the last thing there is seasons end and real world people or horses can only do so much. Yeah. But in the digital space, you have that infinity, right? Like, for example, we can play one cricket game a day in the real world, like, or maybe two IPL games in a day, or depending on how many matches, but there's a limit to it. But in Meta 11, you can have an infinite number. You probably have 1,000 games a day, if not 3,000. And we saw that with ZED.RUN as well, like where if you own a horse in the real world, Well, yeah, you can race it one day on a Sunday, and I don't know if you need to rest it for a month and then race it again, or he can race next weekend. But in the digital world, he can race like 3 or 4 times a day, right? So it's that kind of exponential growth and unlocking that utility, and also, of course, also democratizing sports for a wider audience.
And before you came on today, I was doing a bit of research. A few things that made you stand out for me was Behaviol's mission to create an immersive, engaging sports gaming experience, but also something that's accessible to everyone. So can you elaborate on some of the steps Behaviol is taking to ensure greater inclusivity within that entire gaming community too?
Yeah, I love that. So again, there's like 3 core pillars when I like to build. One is empowering creativity, and one is fostering inclusivity, and the other one's driving prosperity. And empowering creativity, that's letting the users create along with you, giving them the tools like we talked about, giving them like, this is like the Fortnite model. They've done it, and Roblox as well. They've done this amazingly by giving tools to the users so they can exponentially grow with you. The inclusivity side is really important because, again, from my learnings at ZED.RUN was that we were in the Web3 space calling people to come over. Hey, come join us over here. You can own your horse. This is the future. This is what it's about, right? And not everybody, you have to buy a horse, can afford a horse. And not everybody is kind of into that space. Like, you still got that KYC process, you got that friction points. It's like, it scares you all. Well, instead, to be super inclusive, we're going with a freemium approach, which is more akin to your free-to-play mobile games, right? So you get on, you log in with your email, and you get a cricket player, and you can now play, right? And so free-to-play, jumping, and then of course along the way we want to educate you and show you what it means to own something and where that extra utility of having that ownership comes in, right? But first things first is always fast to fun, or we call it time to fun. That's a metric we use, like from going onto our website to creating an account, how fast do you get in and get engaged with the game, right? And that's an absolute important part. And in that step, you got to remove all that friction, which is a MetaMask wallet or a non-custodial, all that stuff that we've been doing for the last couple of years and still doing, right? And there's solutions coming for that, which is great. But it's our belief that, that the masses aren't there yet. It's still early days for these Web3 games. So we're going with that Web 2 approach to transition to Web 2.5 and then all the way to 3. And it's also important that we're not forcing people, right? Like, we're going to ask for permission when we get to that stage. It's all about meeting them where they are and and being respectful in that journey as well. And then in terms of inclusivity, we spoke about like the barriers, how to create, like breaking down those cultural barriers. And that's where the storytelling is going to come in. Like, and I've said this to a few people before, like, I really want to, I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark at the moment, so I can talk about a cricket Viking player, right?
Yeah.
Imagine him coming in and wielding with his beard and his braided hair, and he's got some markings, and he's wielding a battle axe that then turns into a cricket bat, right? And what's his story, and how does he fit in this universe? Well, you'll know soon, because we'll be releasing that shortly. But that's where that whole marvel of universe comes in. I really want people to look at these players and go, oh, fuck, that's cool, like he's cool. And then through that, they go, oh, is that cricket? And then we can break down those barriers. And then cricket's a really fun game, like 5-day test match to maybe not, right? Yeah. But some of them are legendary, like some amazing stories, especially with the rivalries, right? Sports on its own is maybe not as exciting as sports with rivalries, sports with story tied around it, right? Why is that guy like this? Or who is he to say this? Or why is she acting like that? I mean, remember the whole Tonya Harding story?
Yeah.
Like, for example, like that's a crazy story, right? And that's the wrapped around sports, right? Like there's documentaries and movies made on that stuff, right? So that's really important. And that's where I guess my Hollywood days of working in film comes in, and we can wrap some really engaging stories around it and make it inclusive, not just for the Commonwealth or for Asia, South Asia, the target areas where these 2.5 billion fans sit, but making it inclusive beyond that. And then also introducing female characters, for example. Like, that's a really important thing as well. We have some really cool female characters. Again, it's much akin to what Fortnite have done. And we've done some research on why did my 10-year-old son, he plays with female characters and not the male characters. And there's many reasons for that. That can be, they think that the hit rate on the character is less because they're more slimmer, right? So it's harder to see you on a map. But I also think it's just the appeal of the characters as well, right? So yeah, there's a lot of ways to break down that. And at the end of it all, we really want to put our players into the game. to create their own stories and have their own journeys, right? They are the fabric of the game. Without the players or without the fans, the sport doesn't exist, right? So that's really important that we honor that and we put them in a position to, yes, there's the story world, there's all these things you can do, but you are now get full agency to then create and act and be and compete in the way that you want to do. So.
Wow, incredibly cool. You had me at Viking cricket player, so I'm going to be checking that out. I'm also
going to go back. The samurai one as well, right? Like, just it's amazing. I think I'm really like I get goosebumps every time I'm thinking about. I'm doing all this development work on the side, and it's so much fun.
Well, not only am I going to check that out and what you're doing at Behaviol, but I'm also going to go back and check ZED.RUN out because I'm never going to be able to afford having my own horse. But a virtual racehorse sounds incredibly cool. So I promise you I'll check that out. And on this podcast, I've had some of the biggest names in VC funding and tech have either been guests or listened to this podcast over the last 8 years that we've been running it. So I've got to ask, is there a person that you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with and why? Because he or she might just be listening to this. It'd be great to see if we could manifest something and make something happen. But who would that person be and why?
I've had the pleasure of meeting Gary Vee a few times, and I know you've had him on your pod, haven't you? Yeah. So Gary, if you're listening, man, I'd love to have breakfast with you. No, and the reason being, I just love the way he doesn't beat around the bush, right? And I think he says the things how that he should be said. And he says it in a way where you can't get mad at him. I just think he's honest. He's passionate about what he does. I see myself in him in some ways with what he thinks and how he does. I mean, I'm nowhere near Gary's level, but I just really respect what he's doing for the industry and in his space as well, right?
Yeah.
On top of that, then Mark Cuban, I think, is another guy that I'm interested in. And there might be the basketball side. I think we would sit down and talk more basketball. I'm a big Luka Doncic fan. He's got him on his team. But Mark Cuban is also on the pulse of technology and being in the space. So I think he would be an interesting guy too.
Two great choices, Gary Vee and Mark Cuban. Now let's throw that out into the ether. Let's see what we can manifest. Just promise me you'll let me know if you do hear anything back. But
that'll be amazing.
But for anyone listening, wanting to find out more about Behaviol, we did mention the horse racing thing as well. So where would you like to point everyone listening to? And also if they want to connect with you or your team or community, what's the best starting point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're always looking for collaborators, right? I mean, I think with the sports omniverse and the way that big brands coming into it, and we saw that with ZED.RUN, for example, we had partnerships with Budweiser, with Stella, we did partnerships with NASCAR. So we're always looking for people to collaborate with. And now with these digital avatars and breaking down the barriers and having there's an even more opportunity, I would say, to explore new collaborations. You can reach out to me on Twitter. I am Chris Ebeling. On LinkedIn, I'm very active on both social platforms. Twitter is really important for me to stay up to date with how the community is feeling, what's the sentiment of the people. LinkedIn is, of course, professional. But you can also reach out to us via Behaviol.com or meta11.com.
Well, in nearly 2,400 interviews on this podcast, your story is one of those that will stay with me for a long time. And I love how he began as this world-class animator, creative director, writer, and digital artist, working on huge Hollywood blockbusters such as the Lego movies, The Great Gatsby, and then progressing to ZED.RUN now, the blockchain-based digital horse racing game that allows players to buy, breed, and race NFT horses. That's got me hooked. I'm very intrigued about that. But to present day, using AI to power AAA games and how AI is going to change the gaming industry, esports, etc. Incredible stuff. But thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and share your story today.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. We're only just starting, I believe. I'm hopefully still young enough to keep going. But thanks for having me and thanks for sharing my story.
So there we have it, a deep dive into the AI-driven world of gaming and so much more with Chris from Behaviol there. And I love discussing the incredible use of AI in creating things like digital athletes, but also the ethical considerations, the future of esports, privacy and the traditional sports and gaming industry, and how they're merging to create something new and immersive experiences for fans. Incredibly exciting. And there's clearly a lot to look forward to in the world of sports entertainment. So thank you, Chris, for sharing your journey and your insights on this interconnection of technology and sports. And I hope everyone listening are as excited about the future of gaming as I am after this conversation. Remember, you can check out Meta11 and all the great work they're doing and see the future of gaming in action. And if you've got any questions, please email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Neil C. Hughes across all social channels. And of course, be sure to tune in next time for another episode of Tech Talks Daily, where we'll continue to explore the latest innovations in tech and the impacts they're having on our world. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show every single day. I appreciate it more than you'll ever know. Hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow. But thank you for listening today. And until next time, don't be a stranger.